So I know at the end of episode 4, I promised you an update on what I've been doing to stay healthy for the past year or so. And we're going to get to that because that's an important part of the story. But I want to tell you another story, and it's not a short one. Imagine that. And I want you to stay to the very end because we're going to have a special guest star that you're not going to want to miss. All right, enjoy the video. So my good buddy Russ, he lives up in the Boston area, but when he comes to Austin, he'll sometimes stay at our house. And when he does, we'll sit on the back deck and we'll chat and visit and talk about things. We'll tell you what we do to prepare for Russ when he comes into town. He's coming here to visit here pretty soon, so we'll shoot a video of that. One time Russ was here and I was wearing a pair of UGG boots. And he said, why are you wearing girls' boots? And I said, I discovered these. And he said, how's that? And I told him the story, and he said, oh, that's a great story. And so I'm going to tell you the story. So good morning from the hayfield. This is my special time of day, but it's also special time of year. They've just cut the hay meadow and baled all the hay, and it's always just especially pretty when they do that. Sure do enjoy coming down here every morning. Some people were asking what we're going to talk about on these episodes. I don't know. I think I'll just kind of decide as I come down the trail. And I know one of Russ's favorite stories is the story of how I discovered UGG boots. You know, those ugly sheepskin boots that are typically worn by 14-year-old girls. Well, that's me. So you're probably asking yourself, hey Trout, how exactly did you discover UGG boots? Well, as you might imagine, that's a long story. But I lived in Australia back in the 80s. And was there for a couple of years and was over there with a buddy of mine, a guy named Gordon Page. And was living in Sydney. And as we traveled around, we would see these guys, yes, guys, wearing these boots. And finally got up the courage to ask, hey, what's the deal with those boots? And they said, these are UGG boots. Well, what are they? And they said, well, they're sheepskin boots. Well, what are they for? Well, we're surfers, and when we get out of the water, our feet are cold. And so we put these on. And so we ask, where do you get them? Well, there's a guy named Shane. And Shane owns a company called Surfboards by Shane. And he started making these sheepskin boots, and they're called UGGs by Shane. I said, why are they called UGGs? And the guy said, well, look at them. They're ugly. I said, fair enough. So there's one thing that Australia has lots of, and it's sheep, and the other thing they have lots of is surfers. So Shane saw a niche, saw an opportunity, and he went for it. So we took 4 buses and 2 trains to get over to Manly, which is where Surfboards by Shane was located. And we went to see Shane, and it was just kind of a little concrete bunker of a building down close to the beach. And he was there shaping surfboards, and we said, we're looking for the boots. He said, they're out front. And so out front on a on a bench. It was 2 cinder blocks with a 2x12 piece of lumber. There were a whole bunch of these sheepskin boots. And so we bought a couple pairs of the sheepskin boots, wore them while we were in Australia, brought them back to the States. Well, this was in 1986, and guess what? There weren't a whole lot of people in the United States wearing those boots. In fact, I've never seen them before. But I was wearing them because they're warm, and they're actually surprisingly waterproof. Anyway, they don't last forever, and after a while, my UGG boots were starting to get kind of ratty. And I knew some people that were going to Australia, and I said, hey, take a look for some UGG boots. And they're like, what are UGG boots? And I told them the whole long story. And I said, size 10. And they said, okay. Well, the other good thing about UGG boots is close is good enough on the size. You actually want them a little bit on the small size for starters, because your foot kind of molds to them, and they just kind of start to fit better and better and better over time. Anyway, the folks that went to Australia brought me back my second pair of Uggs, and that was good, and that was probably in around 1996. Well, roughly 10 years later, my Uggs were starting to wear out, Ugg pair number 2, and by that time, you were starting to see them a little bit more in the States. And at that time, I was in the dive industry, had owned a couple of dive shops, and would go to trade shows, and something called DEMA, Dive Equipment Manufacturers Association. They have a big trade show every year, and went to DEMA, and there was a guy selling UGG boots. Well, at the end of the DEMA show, the exhibitors, they all want to sell everything that they brought to display, so they don't have to carry it back. And so I made an offer to this fella for a pair of Uggs, and he said sure. And I got my third pair of Uggs, and by this time they were actually called Uggs UGG. They had that company, UGG, had acquired Shane's original design, which was actually, can't remember if it was UG or UGH, but it was not spelled the way that today's Uggs are spelled. Anyway, so in 2005, I got me a pair of what now most people would consider original Uggs, but not by Shane. When I met Mrs. Trout, Mrs. Trout lived in Austin, Texas, and Mrs. Trout had a Samoyed named Sydney. And when we were courting, as I like to call it, I would try to be the gentleman that I wanted her to think I was. And when she would come over to visit me at my apartment, she would sometimes bring Sydney, and I would offer to go and walk Sydney. And I would put my UGG boots on to go walk Sydney. Well, she had never seen UGG boots before. And she said, why do you wear those? I said, because it's cold out. She said, yeah, it's kind of been raining. I said, yeah, these are surprisingly waterproof. I said, you ever seen a cold, wet sheep? She said, well, no, I don't think I have. So anyway, I walked Sydney in the UGG boots, came back, and I was all fine. So a little bit later, it was time to walk Sydney again. And she said, I'll walk Sydney if I can wear your boots. And I said, well, sure, that's fine. And so she wore the UGG boots. And that's pretty much the last I saw of those UGG boots. Mrs. Trout decided that UGG boots are a wonderful thing. Well, something very tragic happened about that time. It's a moment that I still look back on sadly. Y'all remember Sex and the City? Yep, that show. Well, Carrie Bradshaw, the character that's played by Sarah Jessica Parker, was always wearing the latest and greatest new fashions. And I just happened to be watching an episode of Sex and the City, and Carrie Bradshaw is wearing UGG boots. And I called my best buddy from back in Alabama. I lived in Alabama for a while. That's another story. And I called Keith, and he and I, we love Sex and the City. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I like that show. I'm confident enough in my sexuality to admit it. Anyway, I called my buddy Keith Jemison. I said, "Oh my gosh, did you see that?" He says, "Oh my gosh, they're wearing your boots." And I said, who'd ever thought that 20 years later, after discovering UGG boots, they would become the new fashion statement of Carrie Bradshaw. Well, that's not the tragic part. The tragic part is that every 14-year-old girl in America wanted to wear the boots that Carrie Bradshaw was wearing on Sex and the City. And they became sort of a girl's fashion item. Well, even though I'm very, very, very confident in my sexuality, I am also pretty vain sometimes, and I just really didn't want to be seen walking around in girls' shoes. And so about 10 years went by, and I didn't really wear my UGG boots out anymore. I still wore them around the house, and I still wore them around when I was walking the dog and this, that, and the other thing. But I used to wear them everywhere. And for 10 years or so, I didn't wear them everywhere. But then a wonderful thing happened, and guys over the past few years have started wearing UGG boots out and about again. And now UGG's got a whole line of products. They've got slippers, and they've got short boots, and they got tall boots, and this, that, and the other thing. But I still love just the original classic UGGs by Shane design UGG boots, and I'm gonna keep on wearing them. Anyway, that's the story about how Trout discovered and made popular UGG boots. Yeah, okay, I exaggerate, but that's the story. Catch y'all later. So for the record, Russ didn't believe my UGG story, and hence the expression GTS that Russ taught me. GTS stands for Google that stuff, and except Russ doesn't use stuff. Anyway, so Russ GTS UGG boots, and sure enough, Russ read that Google agrees that Jess Harmon Trout discovered UGG boots. Okay, it actually says that the original UGG boots were by Shane. And if you don't believe that part of the story, GTS. All right, we rolling? Take one. On today's episode of Fun with Flags, we currently have presented behind us the Union Jack, the flag of the United Kingdom. And to tell us more about it, we have a special guest. Mr. Russ Jackson is here from Boston via London and is going to tell us the history of this amazing and beautiful flag.
The history of the flag. You put me on the spot here, Jesse, but I'll do my best. The history of the flag is there's actually three flags stacked on top of each other. So there's the flag of England, which is the St. George's Cross, which is the red cross on a white background. Nice. There's the Scottish flag, which I can't remember the name of, but that's a blue background with a white diagonal cross. Yep. And don't hate me on this one, but I believe the third one is, I can't remember if it's Wales or Ireland now. So
Which is Wales.
I guess put it in the comments below. Is that what you do? Yeah. Okay, so, but I thought it was Wales, but the Welsh flag is now the dragon, so maybe it was a previous one. But anyway, it is three flags stacked on top of each other that make up United Kingdom.
I did not know that.
And I'm just happy to be here in Ding Dong.
So coming to you from Ding Dong, Texas, a lesson on the United Kingdom flag, I guess technically is what you would call it. The UK flag for my good buddy Russ from the UK, visiting from Boston.
And the great thing about having been three flags in one, when there's a world event such as like the World Cup, when England is still in the World Cup, we roll on our St. George's crosses. But then if England happen not be in, but Wales or Scotland is, we can roll the St George's Cross in and put the UK back out again. So,
All right.
There you go. So
And was Nevis ever part of the United Kingdom?
I'm not sure.
I don't know either. Again, in the comments, feel free to tell us everything you know about Nevis.
And don't forget to subscribe.
And like.
There's all that, and like, and all that sort of stuff. And for the record, I was subscriber #1 to Trout Tales.
It's true.
That
It's
is my
true.
life's work, and I'm very happy about it.
This is the reason this channel even exists. Blame him.